In this video, I'm going to talk about the Panasonic's XLR modules. This is the first generation, this is the second generation, and I'm going to test them on the GH7 because the GH7 is able to do 32-bit recording when using the second generation, not the first generation. And I believe at the recording of this video, the GH7 is the only camera in the Panasonic lineup that accepts these XLR adapters that can do 32-bit float. There has been firmware updates where you can now use the full frame Lumix cameras, some of the select ones with this module, but you don't get 32-bit float. So let's see what it looks like when you plug in both of them. So GH7, here's the first gen, which is still a good buy. If you don't need 32-bit float, this is still fine. I've already done a video of this handle by Small Rig, but this is the only handle that I've seen that attaches to small rig cages that gives you enough clearance to put on both modules, the first one and the second version. When you pop the first XLR module on the GH7 and you put it in 4-channel mode, you only have the option to go XLR plus camera, and what that does is gives you the channel 1, channel 2 of the XLR, and then the other channel 3 and 4 coming from the 3.5 jack on the camera itself, and you select it. The only problem is you can monitor all 4 channels, 3 and 4, or 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the same time. But when you look at the readout here, it only shows you channel 1 and 2, which is up here. I don't know a way to visualize the other ones. If you know, please let me know in the comments, but I haven't figured that out yet. But I do hear it in the monitors when I turn this headphone sound monitoring to all 4, I hear all 4. So I can plug in something like the Sennheiser wireless profile into the 3.5 and then if I have 2 of these, you can have up to 4 channels. So I'll have 2 for the stereo mic here and then these 2 at the same time. These are controlled up here with these dials manually, and then to control 3 and 4, what you do is you go into the other menu and you go into the gain, sound recording gain, and here is where you can visualize, and here's where you adjust the gain of the 3.5. You do not have the option to do 32-bit float when you're using XLR plus camera. You can see here or maybe you can't see, it's locked at 2448. So that is with the XLR module, the first one. The version 2 has a 3.5 built into the whole system up here. I think that's why it's longer. And then here is where you can add input 3. And then this input 3 is a stereo, so this is 4 channels, even though it looks like there's three inputs, but it's 4 channels of audio. And once you plug it in like this, you can no longer use this 3.5 if you want 32-bit float. The 32-bit float only works when you're using everything, all the input sources, the mic input sources from the module. You now have 32-bit float at 48 kilohertz. You can go to 24 if you want, but 32-bit is why you want to use it. So everything's coming from up here. All of the settings are done on the module itself. But let's say you do want to use the 3.5 or you want scratch audio coming from the internal mics. You can still do that with this module, just like you can with the first module. And then what you do is you go to the 4-channel audio mode and then you go back to XLR plus camera. The issue though is once you go back to XLR plus camera, you lose 32-bit float. So I'm gonna go back to here and see right here, I just lost it. It's locked at 24 bits. I can no longer choose 32-bit. But what you can do now is use the XLR with the 3.5. So you can have something like this mic here plugged in here, and then you can use a combination of either the XLR 1 and 2 or 1 and 2 at the same time, or input 3. You cannot use both XLRs and input 3 at the same time in XLR plus camera mode. What happens is, right here, this selector, you can only do input 1 and 2, or input 3. You cannot do all 3. So what I wanted to do was to see if I can get maybe 6 channels of audio somehow, like I have a mix down of one, but that you cannot do that with this camera. And if you do use the XLR, you just cannot use the input 3 at all. You just use right over here. And that's how this system works, this Panasonic. So it has its own little quirks, but I still like that quirk better than the Sony's version. So on Sony, here's the FX3 with their XLR module. And in this mode, you either turn off the XLR module completely or you turn it on. So now that it's off, the 3.5 jack here is where the audio is coming from. But once you turn it on, it disables the 3.5 and everything needs to come from the module up here. 4-channel, 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, and all of the adjusting happens right here. And the minute you turn this off, menu setting, you lose the MI shoe, and then now your audio levels are just coming from your onboard camera. I was hoping that Sony could add a firmware update to give you the same functionality of an XLR plus camera mode, but because they have this switch here that completely disables or enables the XLR module, I don't think that's possible with a firmware update. So those are the differences with these two XLR modules on the Panasonic system, specifically the GH7. I cannot tell the difference in quality when they're both at 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. 32-bit is different because you got a lot more dynamic range for the audio. So that is a game changer. But if you have another camera that's not a GH7, but you want to have XLR, I think the first version is still viable and it's cheaper. And I would go with the first version if you don't have a GH7.